How did I lose your screen? Oh, can you see me? Because I can't.
Yes.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. I am Sally Walker, and I am the Director of Alumni and Donor Relations here at Roanoke College. And I want to welcome each of you to our very first of our new NOKELive series. We are offering a live event every week this summer, and they range from really fun evenings like tonight, where we're spending time together talking about a film. And then we have other things that are more educational or more maybe thought-provoking. We have Alice Cassens next week. She's a faculty member who's going to talk about the economy. That's on the 10th at 2 p.m. And that's followed by a double offering the next week with Dr. Harry Wilson. He's going to speak about the current political environment. And then 2 days later, he's going to talk about our Roanoke College Polling Center, recent polls that they've done, findings, how they conduct a poll during COVID, and just some wonderful things like that. So please go to our alumni page on our Roanoke website, which I'll put in the chat, and go to the Alumni Hub. And there you'll find links to all the events that we have coming up. So thank you so much for taking time in your evening or your afternoon, depending where you live, and spending time with us. So we have another staff person, Lauren Wood. Lauren's up in the top left, and she is our coordinator of alumni relations. She and I will be helping Joe manage any questions that people have. We encourage you to either unmute yourself and ask a question, or use the chat feature and we can ask the question for you. We can read the questions and ask those to Joe or anyone else in the audience. We are, as Joe and Zach mentioned, we are also streaming this on our YouTube channel. We have a brand new Alumni Association YouTube channel. That's something new and that we've done recently. And I think that's all. So we hope you enjoyed the film. You're going to enjoy our time together as we talk about it. It was really amazing, Joe. Thank you so much for such a wonderful selection. And I am honored to introduce Joe Boucher, class of 1987. Joe is currently our Director of Student Activities here at the college, and we are so grateful. He's done amazing, wonderful things here at the college in his short time back. Might not have felt short, Joe, but it's really a short time in the grand scheme of things. And as you all know, he came back to the college from Hollywood. And Joe, I'd like you to just remind people what you did during that, any highlights that you want to share with them.
Sure.
I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Sally. Welcome to everybody. Thanks to all the students and alumni, faculty, and staff for joining us tonight. It's a good time to come together and talk about a film with such great themes of love and compassion, which I'm sure we could all use right now. As Sally said, I'm the Director of Student Activities, and I also work with the media students on campus. Before returning to Roanoke in 2015, I was a writer and producer in Los Angeles, working on a number of television shows like The Simpsons and King of the Hill. When I got back here in 2015, the Screen Studies concentration, the Media Arts program got a big boost when we made a student film called Daylily Day. I think maybe Steph Spector, I saw that she may have also been joining us tonight, I hope, a wonderful writer. That film went on to 4 New York film festivals. Joining us tonight also are 2 alums who played a big role in Daylily Day. That's Andrew Miller, who is the producer of that film. Omari Chancellor was the male lead. They'll both be joining us. Steph was the writer-director. that same year, Andrew and his classmates came up with the basically Tarantino Film Festival, which is now in its fifth year. We've made 23 films, or the students have made 23 films. And this year, 15 film groups had signed up to make films, but before they were postponed. Andrew is writing and working in film production in Los Angeles, and Omari is at graduate acting school at NYU Tisch, which is a very difficult school to get into. Also joining us is Zach Dalton. He's a current student. He's participated in the basically Tarantino Film Festival as an actor and festival host. He recently won the school screenwriting competition, and he hosts a movie review show on WRKE called Video Killed the Radio Star. So I'll talk a little bit about the film and I'll give you my thoughts. Then the guys can chime in if they have any thoughts, or if any of our other film scholars want to say anything. I know Martha's on. Then we can open it up to a discussion with questions on the film or the film industry. I know we have some students on here tonight who would like to get into the film industry, and we have some who are working in it already. So I hope you all had a chance to watch Okja by the director Bong Joon-ho. He won the Academy Award for Parasite, and that was the first non-English film to win Best Picture. Also, they were the first Asian writers to win a Best Screenplay award. The film was actually recommended to me by some students in last semester's screenwriting class. I think Zach might have been in that class, and I'm glad they did. You know, though I liked Iron Man, I liked The Dark Knight, and I thought The Joker was probably the best picture last year. I'm not a big Marvel DC fan, but Okja is the type of action film I'd like to see more of. You know, it had really meaningful, refreshing storytelling. It had a great lead character, Mija, with strong motivations. I mean, I think her motivations of love and compassion, and most importantly, survival, the survival of Okja. There's nothing that hooks an audience in better than the very basic primal drive of survival. And I felt like Okja was a female superhero movie for adults. That was my main takeaway. Even though it had a hero's journey story structure, the fact that it was a heroine's journey, a film about a female protagonist, really made a difference. And I think we need to see more films like this. The hero's journey, we talk about this a lot with our students. It's a narrative pattern that was first identified by Joseph Campbell in The Hero with a Thousand Faces, a wonderful book. And it was further refined by Hollywood executives in the 80s. It's a mythical storytelling structure in 3 acts, but it's usually from a male perspective, and it can be in a vast majority of films. If you're ever sitting in a film and you've wondered that you know exactly what's going to happen in the film, it's probably because you do, because there's thousands of films that follow this structure. And the reason that happens is because in Hollywood, film executives tell filmmakers all the time, they have they say, give us the same thing, just different. So, that's the challenge of the filmmaker, to try and find a fresh way of telling a story that's been told 1,000 times. So other than telling a story about a heroine, which had a big impact on the end of the film, which I'll talk about, how else did the filmmaker make Okja different and fresh? I mean, to me, one of the main things was it was a foreign film that didn't feel like a foreign film, since it was in English. I mean, I love foreign films, but it almost felt more like a Terry Gilliam or a Wes Anderson film than a foreign film. And I think, that was, very different, and probably one of the reasons why it won the Academy Award. as well, that it didn't feel that foreign. The other thing is that he does really well is he blends multiple genres. You know, instead of making a comedy or an action or a drama film or a film that had a message, you know, this film had all of those genres in it. And it's really difficult for a foreign director to make a comedy film. I mean, it's hard for American directors to make funny films. It's really hard for a foreign director because comedy doesn't always translate. There's so many nuances in it. And I love the kind of dark slapstick humor that this film had. My favorite character was Paul Dano's character, Jay. He was kind of this trickster with the Animal Liberation Front. I thought that whole non-violent storyline was really funny. I loved his line when the one character Silver is kind of starving because he thinks all food production is exploitative, and you know, and he says, you know, I admire your conviction, but your pallid complexion concerns me. There's so many great moments like that. There was a lot of great payoffs. You know, one of the things in comedy is, you know, you want to set up things and then you want them to pay off. You know, this whole, they had so many great things about nonviolence. And then when Jay finds out that Kay did not get Misha's consent, he just pummels him, you know, which was a great scene. You know, also later on when Kay shows back up and he's got translations or sacred tattooed on his arm. That was great. The Miranda trucker joining them at the end. And it was also a drama. It was a message film. I mean, this film had big themes: animal rights, corporate responsibility, GMO foods, which is, you know, it's very current. I know with the coronavirus epidemic going on, there's this whole thing going on in the pig industry with ventilation shutdown. You know, it really focuses on a very you know, tough industry. But the film was very dense, and he did a great job of balancing all these different themes and tones in the film. I mean, I ended up watching it 2 or 3 times, and there was a lot to kind of absorb there, and I even enjoyed it more on the second and third viewing than I did on the first. It had other themes like hypocrisy, Lucy Miranda, you know, how she was lying about the Super Pig's creation and showing she's not very different than her father and her sister. Johnny Wilcox, the TV host animal lover, per se. I'll talk a little bit more about him later, but all of Bong Joon-ho's films have these big themes in them. 2 other films that I recommend, obviously Parasite, if you haven't seen it, you know, it definitely has a strong survival instinct that all his films have, but also this kind of 99 versus the 1%. Snowpiercer, another film that I recommend, again, you know, a foreign film, but really with English language and English actors. You know, big themes: climate change, strong survival themes. And then lastly, I mean, it was an action film. I mean, it had really cool chase sequences in the truck, in the subway, on the bridge. I mean, filmmakers can really do anything nowadays and make everything so realistic with animation and special effects. And this director really excels at action and visual storytelling. The character animation of Okja and the Super Pigs was really incredible, and it just really reinforced that emotional story between Okja and Mija. The film was beautifully shot. I mean, the mountain home, which you can see behind Zach here. Zach was nice enough to, it was, you know, just a beautiful setting to start the film in. There's a great shot in the film when Mija is going into Seoul and she's wearing this red coat and everybody else is in gray and black. And she turns around and she goes against the crowd, you know, just these great visual cues of, you know, this is a, you know, a special character who's going against the grain. The ending, it was, you know, it was pretty terrifying at the slaughterhouse, but the animation and the whole look of the concentration camp look was pretty incredible. And then the music is interesting. I'm a big fan of music in films. It had this unusual kind of klezmer bullfight score. You know, almost so much where the music becomes its own character, kind of like Curb Your Enthusiasm, where that has that French calliope music that you hear all the time. You can't help but, you know, kind of be engaged. And then there's the subway scene, which was just pretty incredible, where John Denver's Annie's song starts playing. Now, I mean, they had me at Annie's song. I mean, I have to admit, I'm kind of old, and you know, I remember that song as a kid. It literally, when I went to my relative's house, my mother made me sing that song to our relatives. So like it was a major flashback when that came on. But I mean, I think it was a great way to kind of make the film kind of sentimental and reinforce the kind of love and compassion. It was, you know, could have been considered corny, but it was just a great sequence. And you know, finally, I mean, I had a great ending. I touched on this a little earlier with the heroine's theme, but endings are really tough to do, and they can make or break a film. And the fact that it was this heroine's journey, um, you know, it was a female story, and it made for just a much more interesting and less predictable ending. You know, it still had this big act three with, you know, the set piece at the parade where the capitalists and the demonstrators and the consumers all come together. You know, in that sense, it was a pretty typical, you know, start to act three. But the ending, you know, instead of using violence, Misha, you know, makes this deal with Nancy Miranda to save Okja with the gold pig. Uh, you know, it's tragic when we see all the other pigs, and you know that it's going to kind of be business as usual at the plant. But there, you know, there's a moment of hope when Mija and Okja save the baby super pig, and again later in the end credits when we see that the ALF is kind of regrouped when Jay gets out of prison. Um, if this story were a hero's journey, kind of like, you know, every other film that gets made, or so many other films that gets made, um, you know, the male protagonist would have needed to vanquish the enemy, destroy the plant, and free all the animals. And you know, we're in some ways that's, you know, what people expect. I mean, I think, you know, telling it with a female protagonist just made a much more kind of interesting and nuanced film at the end, and realistic in some ways. Um, so I think there were just so many of those were some of the elements where I think this film was just really, you know, a fresh perspective on a, you know, on an action story. My biggest criticism, I think, of the film would be Jake Gyllenhaal's Johnny Wilcox character. I thought he was just a very cartoonish, over the top villain. I'm not sure if he was directed that way, or that was, you know, they let him make that choice. To a lesser extent, Tilda Swinton, the Lucy Miranda character, uh, was a little cartoonish as well. But you know, turnabout is fair play, and you know, the film was a Korean perspective of American bad guys, and there have been countless Hollywood films where you know, other groups are depicted kind of cartoonishly as well. So, I mean, I think that would be my one criticism on the film. You know, when I was thinking about, you know, that this was kind of like a female superhero movie for adults, I was thinking about this controversial kind of New York Times article that Martin Scorsese had written about Marvel films, and saying they weren't real cinema. But But in that article, he talks about his favorite filmmakers, and he says, "I know I'm going to see something absolutely new, and be taken to unexpected and maybe even unnameable areas of experience. My sense of what is possible in telling stories with moving images and sounds is going to be expanded." And he wrote this before the Parasite won the Academy Award, but I know he's a big fan of Bong Joon-ho's films. And I mean, I kind of felt that way about this film. I mean, I really love to see filmmakers who kind of show you something unexpected and kind of expand the possibilities of cinema. And one of the things, the fact that filmmakers can do anything now because they have the technology, the technological ability to do it, it doesn't always make for a great film. But in a case like this, I mean, he really used those the technology to make, to really enhance the emotional story between the characters. And so that's pretty much my take on the film. I don't know if Zach has any thoughts, or Andrew and Amari have showed up, or anyone else has some things they'd like to contribute. But yeah, Zach, you got anything?
I mean, you got most of what I was thinking the first time. I was just telling people it's been a while since I had watched it. I think I watched it last year when it came out, but I actually just got finished watching Parasite by the same director, and I really enjoyed Parasite. And I don't know why I didn't connect the two dots, because a lot of kind of his humor that you see in Okja is also in Parasite. And to echo what you said with the action sequences, I think Snowpiercer, I reminded me a lot of Snowpiercer, the like high adrenaline, high stakes sort of thing that was happening throughout most of them. Not Snowpiercer, that's now a TV show, by the way. I don't know if anyone's watched that, but I agree with the score too. I mean, one of the things we talk about on my radio show is like the biggest part to me in movies is the score, because it gives kind of that extra, I guess, the extra mile of what's happening. Because I don't know if anyone's ever gone and watched, there's on YouTube, it was Star Wars, the throne room scene without music. It's just like the most awkward thing you can possibly experience. So I think it would be interesting to go back and see, kind of like, especially when they use the John Denver song, how that would change the scene. That's how my mind goes with a lot of these. It's just kind of like thinking what could change and what makes it such a strong movie. And I think a lot of what you've said is where it comes from. I also think, and this is just me, I'm a big supporter of Netflix originals and like streaming movie originals, because first of all, it's like instant release and a wider audience can be reached. But also it's nice to see it kind of get out of just like theatrical releases. And I know this came out in 2017, which in my opinion was when Netflix got a lot of traction with their movies, because they just, is like 2 or 3 years after Beast of No Nation. I mean, that's what started their whole thing. But I really think that this Okja was one of the ones that solidified the fact that Netflix can produce good movies. Have they kept up with that? It's debatable. There's been a few good ones here and there, but that's just some of mine. It's definitely one of my favorites. And I guess to add on, I just took advanced film course with Dr. Larson Harris, where we talked about Eastern and East Asian gender and all that. So it was really cool to see how the hero was this female lead, and the ending, especially because you touched on it with the hero cycle. If it was a guy, like he'd have to vanquish the evil corporation, but it was kind of nice to see it be resolved, and like the main focus of the whole thing was just love and compassion. So
yeah, and another thing that Scorsese mentions in his in that article is that films like this, though, really deserve to be seen in a big theater. I mean, to me, this is like a perfect popcorn film where you want to go into a film, a movie theater, and just totally absorb into this world for 2 hours. And you know, a lot of these films are getting made for streaming services now, but it doesn't take anything away from them. Now, you weren't as familiar with the John Denver Annie song, probably.
It was a little bit before my time.
What did you think? Like, how did it? You know, what did you think when you heard it? Were you like, what the heck is going on?
I mean, kind of. I listened to that. I'm sure it's come on before. But again, the only John Denver song that I really know is Country Roads.
Country Road.
Yeah, but that's because my family lived in West Virginia for a little bit, and that's their anthem, he said. But it was definitely strange, and it was one of those where I did a double take or a double listen to where I ended up pulling my phone out, and I'm like, what song is that? And I looked it up, and I can understand why you had the appeal, and I would love to hear you reenact it and sing it sometime. But
yeah, I'll have to do that sometime. Or find the audio cassette tape that the recording is on.
That would be great.
So, you know, Joe, sometimes we do karaoke for senior week. So, you know.
Yes, I've heard. That would be my song. Yeah. Andrew and Amari, those guys show up yet?
Yes, they're on the call.
Oh, they did. Are they? Are we able to see them on Zoom or?
So I can see that they're on. I'm not seeing their faces yet, and it looked like they are muted. So Amari and Andrew, we need you. Oh, there they are. There they are.
Hey, what's up, boys?
Cheers, yo.
So I think Joe wants to know what y'all thought.
Did you guys watch the film?
Yes, we had some.
Well, I saw it when it came out. My memory's a little fuzzy on it, but like that, you kind of nailed it. But
No, yeah,
I mean, it was just like Parasite in the sense that like it's the kind of movie that has everything you could possibly want in a movie. You know, like it's just such a gorgeous blend of genres. It's an action film. It's a mystery. It's romance. Yeah, I mean, you know, in some sense, but like, yeah.
Yeah, that's not easy to do, to blend all the genres. And I think all his films kind of do that. Snowpiercer was great too.
Yeah. Snowpiercer. You got it, Joe. You're the man. There's a reason that you're the man. You're the man I want to talk to about this, Joe. You nailed it. I have nothing more eloquent to say. But it's good to see all your beautiful faces, especially you, Steph. I love you so much.
Where is Steph?
She's there. Look at those cute little girls.
I love you guys too.
Oh, hi, Steph.
Included, Joe.
How you doing?
I'm good. All right, I'm gonna mute myself now.
Hey, Joe, can you see, we had a question from Justin Hoyer. Can you see it in the chat feature?
Oh, let me look. Oh, the chat. I see the chat is going on.
We got a chat going on.
All
So
right.
this is the last thing. He just asked a question.
My only question is, how my mind still describes the main character chasing? She obviously was bubbling, she was Asian. I could find no answers beside Hollywood magic. I don't think that.
I think he's stuck.
Disguise the main. So I think your question is about how they did the effects, maybe. Can you guys see that? Zach, can you see that question?
Yeah, I can see. I think it's one with the effects, but it's also just kind of like, I mean, I agree. She did do some things that I've never seen.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
do.
to me, that's where you know why I said it feels like a female superhero
Right.
movie, because you know obviously she was doing things, you know, falling off the car. I mean, they were sure getting hurt, but she could have gotten hurt worse. You know, landing on the truck, flying off the back of the truck. You know, holding on to Oak's collar. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things that weren't realistic, but but yeah, that, I mean, like Omari just said, it was this kind of blend of all these different genres, and the action movie and superhero movie was certainly, one of them. But I do love films where the, the superhero has very ordinary abilities, or doesn't have, in this film, I guess her superpower would be her single-minded pursuit to just save Okja. All the love and compassion, and again, a very, not looking for revenge, not looking to vanquish her enemies, just this kind of pure love and compassion for this creature that she raised. So I hope that answers Justin's question.
I could also sum it up as much as adrenaline. I mean, getting chased, falling off a car, if your adrenaline's high, you're not really gonna feel it till later. She wakes up the next day and her arm hurts. She's like, ouch. That could be, scientifically speaking, if that's something you want to go with. But again, it could be just movie magic, or what Joe said. That is way better.
Yeah, I mean now they don't even have to do effects. Everything can be green screen too. It's amazing how sophisticated it's gotten. If anyone has any questions for some of our film alums who are, as I said, Andrew is working in LA now, and Amari's going to school in New York at Tisch. I know Steph, I'm sure, is still writing and thinking about films all the time. Zach?
I have a question.
Yes.
This is April Lynch. How are you, Joe?
Hi, April.
Hi. I guess breaking into the industry is very cantankerous or difficult. So how did you become a producer of King of the Hill?
Well, some of it has to do with timing and, being able to take advantage of opportunities. Originally, when I went out there, I wasn't working in the industry. I didn't know how to get in the industry. One day I snuck onto the Fox lot and talked my way into a job in the mailroom at 20th Century Fox, and started delivering Rupert Murdoch his mail. It was a great place to be, and it was a great place to start, although I didn't really have a vision about how to advance in the industry, other than I was determined to be the best mailroom guy that I could be. I didn't really know how to make films or write or do anything yet, but I was a really good mail guy.
Yeah, you were, Joe. Woo! Deliver that like a bounce. Yeah.
And that led to different opportunities. Then there was a writer's strike, and we kind of got stuck in the mailroom for months. And but when the writer's strike was over, everybody jumped back into production, and they really just needed production assistants and or what you would call gophers. And I took a job on the Tracy Ullman Show, which I loved. I was the set PA on the Tracy Ullman Show, and got to learn a lot about production and how television shows work and how the writers' rooms work. And we spun off to the Simpsons, and that was a really big opportunity because they hadn't made an animated cartoon for years. I think the Flintstones had been the last hit. There's maybe another show called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, but nobody in Hollywood knew how to do a primetime animated show. And, that was perfect for me. I love to kind of like just trailblaze and kind of find new ways to do things. And that's what The Simpsons was. It was inventing this kind of new animated pipeline, and nobody in town knew how to do it. So it was a great opportunity to just, really work hard and use some of the skills I had to advance. And obviously, in those 3 or 4 years when I went from a production assistant to producing The Simpsons, a lot of those skills that I acquired along the way, led me to, eventually produce King of the Hill. I mean, a big difference of, learning, you know, it was the Simpsons versus King of the Hill was like, it was like, you know, being a stowaway on a ship, and then one day you become the captain of the ship. You know, on the King of the Hill, they actually hired me to be the captain of the ship. So they were both very different experiences, but just incredible experiences. I mean, I think, you know, Andrew might be able to help pick up like that point when you know, start to get those production assistant jobs as well, and you're looking for different jobs in the industry. You gotta have any comments to make about that, Andrew? You're kind of living my old life now.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely different. I mean, coronavirus has obviously changed, you know, everything. So I have no idea what's going to look on the other side of this. But obviously the jobs are hard, and it's about getting your foot in the door. And Joe's been a great help. I mean, I'd say 96% of the people I've worked with, Joe personally knows, or I met them because of somebody that Joe knew. So it definitely is about who you know in that town, unfortunately. But there you go. But I will say on the other side of this too, though, the landscape is changing. You have to remember when Joe went out there were what, 3 major networks? I guess it was the 3, right? Now, I mean, think about it. You have your streaming services. I think somebody already spoke to this. Zach, and you said like you love the Netflix originals. I mean, that's Netflix, that's Hulu. I mean, Amazon. In 2020, last year I was working in development with another Roanoke alum actually, and they launched 5 streaming services, or they're going to this year. Like, I mean, like, but I mean just like in general, 5 more are being launched. So there's opportunity. There's crazy amounts of opportunity. Honestly, even more than when Joe was out there. I mean, and he had to break into the big 3. There's endless opportunity here, and what that's going to look like, and especially after Corona, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But the good news is if you create content and you have like the drive to create, I mean, then you do have all that opportunity to get stuff in the air. You don't have to impress just 3 groups of executives. So it's new. It's all new. This is actually, I mean, I've been told it's a pretty good time to get into it, although it's hard. It always is always hard. It's I've heard people say it's the hardest industry to break into. I don't know if that's true, but maybe. But this is a cool and an interesting time to give it a shot.
Omar,
Can
you
I
can,
ask you- I'm sorry.
go ahead, April.
Can I ask you another question? I'm sorry, but I'll let you finish.
Oh no, I was just gonna have Omari give us a perspective on maybe what's happening in New York, but go ahead and ask your question and then.
As far as writing a foreign film, I worked on a screenplay at UCLA with a professor called the Akashic Record. And to me, it is difficult, I guess, to write a foreign film because part of my film was in Nepal. I mean, well, part of the script, the screenplay, I wrote it as part of the scenes in Nepal. But what would you suggest for a screenwriter writing a foreign film?
It does. I've been told. Sorry, Joe. So I can jump in. It just doesn't matter. I tell you that in LA. Joe probably tell you the same. It doesn't matter. Just write what you're gonna write. As crazy as it is, as good as it is, just write it. This is really obnoxious. Joe's gonna hate this, but it's the producer's job to make it work. It's not the writer's. The writer writes the story. Period. It's up to the producer to figure out how to get that thing on the screen. That's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between film and television. So film is a director's medium. The writers, if you write a good film and somebody finds it, they'll buy the film. They don't care who wrote it. They don't care what it's about. If they can think that they can make a good film out of it, you have a good chance of selling it. Television is very different. It's more relationship based. It's a total writer's medium. The writers have the power. The writers are creating the shows. The writers, show up on set and they give the director's notes on how to direct it. So, so with film, yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters what type of a film you're trying to write. If you get it into the right hands and it's a well executed script and they think they can make money on it, getting it into their hands, and that's a different story. But I would just write what you feel you're gonna, the stories you want to tell, and stories you can tell well.
Hey, Joe, I think Janet Sargent has a question.
Okay. Hi, Janet.
Janet, you got to unmute.
Yes, but it's back on the film. Sorry. Do we want to continue the other?
Yes, of course. Of course.
I've only watched 3 of his films, but I've read lots of several articles that I thought were interesting, which is that he mostly wants to talk about class warfare, the class structure in the whole world. So it's interesting. I just throw that out as he's talked about it. He does the same themes in creative ways over and over again. In Parasite, and they usually have fun. They're funny, but they're also extremely violent. In Snowpiercer and Parasite, and this one, I felt the same way when we got to the meatpacking.
Yeah.
It was horrendously violent, and that's what he wants to say. And who is doing this work? I'm not sure about the class part in this film, but I wondered if you had any sense of, if you've read any of, I think it was the New Yorker and several magazines talking about his culture, looking at this culture.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read the articles that you're talking about, but I know from looking at the films, obviously, you know, the themes that he addresses in his films, those things are coming out. I mean, Parasite is interesting because, you know, this idea of this, you know, family becoming a parasite on, you know, because they have these desires and they have these dreams for a better life. Snowpiercer, there's some interesting theories about Snowpiercer that I don't know if they're true or not, but the guy who I think it was the Ed O'Neill, who's the lead?
Ed Harris.
Ed Harris. There's a theory that Ed Harris is actually Willy Wonka from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and after is actually, I'm sorry, take that back, is actually Charlie from Willy Wonka. So now after he got the Chocolate Factory, when the world was going down, you know, he makes this train that goes all around the world. Sorry about the spoiler for people who haven't seen Snowpiercer yet, but that's very similar to Parasite, and they have to go through these stages and trains. It's like a game, kind of like how it was a game in Willy Wonka as well. So, you know, these are constant themes in his film. Obviously, sorry, someone have their, I'm hearing an echo of myself, but, you know, also with Okja, the animal rights and the corporation, I mean, obviously he has strong views on, you know, what corporations are doing to the world. So, yeah, I mean, that's the nice thing about these films. They're personal. I mean, it might not be for everybody, but I'm sure if you go back and you look into his background, there's certainly things about the way he was raised or how he educated himself or how the opportunities he got in film that are influencing these themes that are always kind of popping up in his films. Yeah. But I mean, you know, as we can see, there's, you know, a lot of that is going on in the world right now. So, you know, the cool thing about filmmakers is, are they leading where we're going, or are they capturing the zeitgeist of the moment? You know, I think there happens to be this kind of magical thing in filmmakers, is that a lot of times they're, you know, preceding where we're headed. That there's this kind of, you know, they're capturing what kind of spirit is out in the world, and they're kind of making films about it. So, and, you know, certainly the last couple weeks show us that we're living in a serious world right now. So, yeah, I hope that helped answer some of your questions.
Joe, we also have a question from Martha Kuchar, I believe. She's raised her hand. So Martha, if you could unmute yourself, please, then you can ask your question.
Sure. So Joe, going again on the movie and going back to the character, Dr. Johnny, I forget what his last name is, you know, the cuckoo guy. you said that you didn't like him. He was sort of a cartoon character. But that speaks to, I think, something about the characterizations that this filmmaker projects on the screen in all of his films. And that is that, you know, and this makes them different from the superhero movies. They're not black and white characters. There aren't good guys and bad guys, and you're either one or the other. These are people with real human foibles. They make mistakes, but they get another chance. They get, and they come in, you know, sort of shades of complexity, if you want to put it that way. So, for example, Dr. Johnny, he, you know, was a clown and a character, and he was just doing the bidding of the Tilda Swinton character, you know, just to make a buck, to put himself out there on the screen. But he had that moment. I mean, yes, he was inebriated, but he became inebriated probably because he had to do that vile thing to Okja, right? He had to remove a piece of the meat from the live animal. And he cried. And I think those tears were sincere. You know, when he said, I'm supposed to be an animal lover, and here I'm desecrating this animal. So, you know, even he did not come across entirely clownish. He had that moment when I, for one, was a bit sympathetic. This is what capitalism makes us do. It makes us go against our better values. But if you think of like that, and I'm going to stop talking here in a minute, but, you know, if you think of that character Kay, you know, the one who lied about what Mija says, you know, he says, yes, she's going along with the plan. And then, as you point out, the Paul Dano character beats him to a pulp later on for lying. You know, he comes back, he gets a reprieve. He looks for another chance, even though he makes a mistake. So, I mean, this is this beautiful complexity of the human person, that we're not all just either black or white, you know, evil or good. And just on that point, going back to the previous question or comment about Parasite and that theme about, you know, the struggle with the struggle of the classes and, you know, the underdogs and so on. In that movie, it has always struck me as interesting. The title has always struck me as interesting. Yes, the rich people are parasitically feeding off of the servant class, but, you know, you could say the same in reverse, that family is, you know, using their wiles, their wits, their tricks, their deceit, in order to feed off, to live off of the rich. So, you know, there's, in this filmmaker's work, again, I've seen these three films, Okja, Snowpiercer, and Parasite. There's this really delightful kind of ambiguity where you know, you're not, and that's what makes the film so watchable, because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. You don't know what the character will do. Will he reveal, you know, a good side, a bad side, an in-between side? So I just wanted to go back to that point you made about Dr. Johnny.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you about Dr. Johnny in terms of like the character. I think my impression was just that his acting was so broad and over the top, and I think if he had pulled it back 30%, it would have been more effective. But yeah, I don't disagree in terms of you know, the character having these having his own arc, and every character should have their own arc. And yeah, with Parasite, I actually thought that was what Parasite was, is that the family, you know, it kind of infected the host and kept multiplying by getting every member of the family different jobs within the family. So I actually didn't think of it the other way. But thanks, Martha.
Joe, so kind of going back to Dr. Johnny for just a second, his character for me, I don't know, I kind of wondered if maybe they were intentionally making him be that way as sort of its own sub storyline, because obviously there's sort of the overarching message of animal cruelty in a sense with the factories and things that that have the mass production of products and the genetically modified products. But for him, for me, it was like somebody who was maybe forced into a certain role by, the show that he was a part of. I kept thinking a little bit of Britney Spears and those types of people who were forced into a certain role. And then, in the background, he's really not that person at all, but he's, because he's forced into that persona for the show, it kind of drives him crazy. So I don't know, for me, that was kind of the takeaway I got from that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he sold his soul, he was maybe a TV host, and then all of a sudden with becoming the face of a multinational corporation, has, made him that much bigger and more visible, but it comes at a price, right? That he's got to, like, Lucy said about her, father who ran the corporation was a psychopath. And so, yeah, I mean, that was just kind of my take on the character, but it's hard to tell if it was like the director's choice. I mean, from what I have read a little bit about, where he doesn't feel confident in directing his actors. So, obviously casting is kind of 90% of the job. So I do think a lot of those choices were Jake Gyllenhaal's, and that maybe he was trying to kind of do a Jim Carrey-esque kind of performance or something. But I'm glad it worked for other people.
I guess as another kind of side question to that, this was a Netflix original film. So getting somebody like Jake Gyllenhaal and the main, the lady with blonde hair, whose name I can't ever pronounce, how are they able to do that, I guess, for somewhat of a smaller platform than, kind of the...
They have so much money now. They don't, I mean, it's one of the reasons why also I think you've seen, an explosion in television and the quality of television shows, is because this is tech money. I mean, tech money, they have more money than Hollywood now, so, places like Netflix or Apple TV or Hulu or, Amazon, all getting into this game. They're paying hundreds of millions of dollars. Their production budgets are bigger than the studios now. So it's all about money. You can get whoever you want if you pay them enough.
I will say, Okja, because this is just stuff I look at, but it had a $50 million budget from Netflix. So I'm imagine a good chunk of that went toward getting them and getting the cast that they wanted. But also, it didn't stop at that. Like, they had Paul Dano in it too. And at the time, I think Paul Dano, while he's not like well known, he's still a big enough name that he probably cost a few. But I agree with what Joe said, especially, Netflix, I don't know how much they're worth right now, but everyone under the sun has Netflix almost. I feel like that's a broad statement to say, but it is I believe that they're like the pioneer of streaming platform movies. And so they had a very good head start in terms of budget and being able to pull something like this off. And then you get them, was it John Mulaney just had like a special, Jake Gyllenhaal appears at the very end of it. It's like John Mulaney and the Sack Lunch Bunch or something. And I didn't expect him, but they got Jake Gyllenhaal just to make a quick little 5-minute cameo, and that was it. So I think they also have that relationship. They build relationships with the people they have in their previous stuff to get them to come back. So that helps too.
I actually would have guessed the budget would have been a lot more than 50 million.
I was shocked because I feel like it should have been more than 50 million, but I think it was also, again, they didn't quite turn over as many movies, I think in 2016. So they were a little wary, but I'm glad that they gave him 50 million at least.
It's a good looking film for 50 million.
Well, Joe, I want to respect everybody's time tonight. We've been having the hour went by like that. But does anyone else have a pressing question for Joe or the group?
Yeah, I do. Hi.
Hi, Dennis.
My name's Dennis Simmons. It's Joe Boucher. How do you pronounce that? No, I just wanted to say good on you,
I'm
Joe.
not answering any questions from you.
I grew up to be one of those greedy capitalists, but I graduated with Joe, and I was just psyched to see the invite. So I just had
Dennis, if just for anyone who doesn't know, Dennis was my first writing partner ever.
I was going to ask you how the Pylandify Brotherhood Room, how that really spurred your career. That's a story for a whole nother hour. So anyway, I just wanted to say good on
Dennis
you.
and I used to do comedy skits in the Pylam house, and he was much funnier than I was even. So
Great to see you, Joe.
Man.
We'll catch up at some point. Good to see you.
I'd love to.
Rafa, do you have a question?
Rafa?
Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Hey, how you doing, guys? Hey, nice to see you, Joe.
What's up, Rafa?
Getting younger, man. Getting younger. I actually had a question about something you talked about earlier, about directors or writers, if they're predicting our future or if they're designing our future, and how do you see that with the concept of cultural hegemony and as you were saying, tech companies now are deciding and investing in these movies. So do you think it's a force that they have or a power to decide our future in a way, or do you think there is some other way to make this industry available to grassroots movies and directors and writers? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to that question. I think, the negative side is, it's almost like Blade Runner. I thought, Blade Runner was such a great film, but, the idea that all of a sudden there's only 3 corporations left that kind of do anything. But when you look at the consolidation of wealth and how much, money someone like Jeff Bezos have, well, that, that can translate into a lot of power and but on the other side, the less cynical aspect is like what Andrew was saying about the amount of choices that we have, and that there are more people in the game. And people need stories. In some ways, stories are more powerful than just listening to people talk. I mean, I could sit here for 2 hours and talk, but it's watching a good film where you're immersing yourself in the experience is so much more of a powerful way to get your point across. And for for creators like yourselves, you have all these tools at your disposal. I mean, my daughter started at 12 years old making films, on the internet, and built this whole fan base of 40,000 teenage girls. And, she's up to 2 million views. I mean, I couldn't even get 2 million views on the last TV show I did with, MTV, which was like Good Vibes. I think we were having 50,000 people watch those shows, and we were happy. So I think there's more opportunities than ever for young people to like create things because they have the tools, and they have the tools to reach a wider audience anywhere in the world with the internet and the fact that you can find an audience. So yeah, I mean, in some ways it's a definitely a dichotomy right now with everything going on in the world. But for every, crisis, there's an opportunity. That's that, a Chinese symbol for a crisis, I guess, is like danger and opportunity. There's a danger of things going too far, but there's also opportunities created. So I think for young people, I always try and tell them, tell your stories. The world needs to hear your stories, and you guys are going to have to be part of the solution for sure. You're a creative guy.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, I just want to thank everybody again for being on the call tonight for our very first NOKELive event. I couldn't be more thrilled. And it was great to see so many familiar faces and meet some new folks. I love that we have students and alumni and friends on here. It's just so wonderful. And I encourage you all again to visit our website and stay tuned and check social media to see what other events we have coming up. I think our next film discussion will be the last week of June. We're going to look at the film Miracle about the United States hockey team winning the Olympics. It's an anniversary. That was in 1980. So we're going to have some current students who are playing hockey and working to establish a collegiate level hockey team again, and some alumni who play hockey as well. So looking forward to that next film review. Again, thank you all for being here, and stay safe, stay well. Thanks again, Joe. We really appreciate it.
Everybody.
And Zachary and everyone, thank you so
Great seeing
much.
all you guys.
For having me, appreciate it.
Take care.
Cool. I'll see you
Awesome.
guys. You need anything
Zachary,
else?
that went really well.
Yeah, I think it was a blast. If you need